So I highly suggest you listen to these videos. I've had a lot of students tell me they just watch the PowerPoints or flip through the PowerPoints. I highly suggest you're missing a lot of the reading if you just skim through the PowerPoints. So this is the personality unit. This is chapter 10 in your textbook. The personality unit is going to try and describe why you have the personality you do, some of the traits that you have, okay, and then we're going to look a little bit at yourself. So the first one it looks at is the psychoanalytical perspective. The notes that you're probably going to see today are a repeat of things that we've done in development, looking at Sigmund Freud. Humanistic perspective tries to uncover Maslow's perspective. So you probably have been exposed to this one before. Trait perspective tries to describe your different dominant traits. So we will be taking a couple personality tests in class. Social cognitive perspective looks at your environment and your thought process and how that's influenced your personality. And then the last one it'll look at is exploring the self. So this presentation, some of the information has been presented to you before in development. It is a recap of what we've previously learned. It's going to talk about a little bit in the introduction to personality. It's going to talk about the psychoanalytical perspective, what the unconscious, conscious, and preconscious is. It's going to talk about the id, ego, superego. It's going to review the psychosexual stages of development. Okay, and then last but not least, this is a new portion of the video that has been added. It's going to talk about the defense mechanisms. So before we get started into digging into the psychoanalytical perspective, let's talk about just personality in general. Personality is a person's characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. Okay, there are many ideas about what impacts personality, but in this book we will only examine two, the psychoanalytical and the humanistic. Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical theory proposed that childhood sexuality and unconscious motives influence our personality. Okay. Humanistic, however, focuses more on our inner capacities for growth and self-fulfillment. So we have the personalities we do because we want to grow and be self-fulfilling, or we don't. And then we're going to kind of look at current theories of personalities that study the basic dimensions. So what are the different traits people have? The biological roots of these basic dimensions. Do all people have similar traits? And then the interaction of person and their environment. We will look at self-esteem among individuals and their cultures. So let's begin with the psychoanalytical perspective, a little bit on Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was born in 1856 and he died in 1939. He's known as the father of psychoanalysis. He is famous for his id, ego, and superego idea of personality development. He examined the mentally ill. He was a Jew that grew up in Vienna. Okay, he did study medicine. Okay, he married Martha and had 6 kids, and we explored before that the video that we saw that he experimented a lot on his kids, which was probably not a benefit for his children and himself. Okay, he first tempered with cocaine to try and help people, but then he saw that he found out he ended up getting addicted to cocaine, and then it ended up hurting a lot of his patients. So he kind of went away from the drug approach. He first started the talk treatment, as we kind of talked about before, having people come into his office and really get to the root of their problems. He thought that if they really kind of described what was going on with them, that they can uncover their unconscious. And this is where he came up with free association. So how are you feeling today? What is the thought process you're going through? Please explain a little bit deeper for me. Those are all things that happen with free association to get an individual to talk and to allow their unconscious to come out. So first thing that we're going to talk about is in general, what is consciousness? Consciousness can't be seen, it can't be touched. It's the awareness of oneself or the possibility of actually just knowing what is happening inside or outside of an organism. So you're all conscious right now. You're listening to me. You're aware. You're alert. Okay? It is the state of being aware. Preconscious is the stuff right below the surface. It resides just below the level of consciousness. You have this information that's there. You're just not using it. So you have thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that are present but it's not always in our current awareness. So examples could be if I had you guys tell me your phone numbers or your address. Now you're thinking of it, and it's now in your current consciousness, but you're not always thinking of it, so it's just below the surface. That would be a good example of preconscious. And then you have unconsciousness. A dictionary might define the term as being a loss of consciousness in total, like when a person faints. However, in psychology, your unconscious are your desires, your wish, your motives, stuff that drives you. Okay, it's absent from your conscious awareness, but it still influences your thoughts. So it's kind of like I was talking about in the beginning of the year. It's at the bottom of the iceberg. Still drives a lot of your actions or your behavior. So Freud kind of looked at our personality, kind of comes out of understanding one's consciousness, preconsciousness, and unconsciousness. So here it is again. The consciousness is that iceberg above the surface. Okay, things that you're aware of. Me talking right now. Preconscious are things that we can be aware of when we think of them. So if I asked you guys to tell me the stages of Piaget, some pigs can fly, you probably could be sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete, formal. If you thought about them, they would come into your mind. And then your unconscious is all that iceberg way below the surface. Notice how you have a ton of stuff that's way below the surface, and you have a little bit of iceberg above the surface of your conscious awareness. It's the deep hidden reservoir that holds the true us. It's our desires and our fears, a lot of what really drives our behaviors. Terms you do need to know that are associated with Freud is free association. This was a technique or a way to assess the unconscious. So Freud would have, there's his famous chair. He was the person that came up with talk therapy. He said, kind of sit down in my chair. Let's talk about how you're feeling. Why do you feel this way? He tried to dig at that unconscious that was way below the surface. Now, some people state that we should stay away from the surface. If people are fine, don't go digging and prodding at it. But Freud believes can kind of help people grow and mature. Once your memories were freed and relieved, one would actually feel better. This is known as psychoanalysis. The thoughts and actions in our unconscious motives and conflicts can impact our personality and who we are today. So if we understand them, we might be better at understanding ourselves. Okay, another thing that we're going to talk about is Freudian slips. Sometimes our unconsciousness, our unconscious thoughts accidentally slip into our consciousness. So it's something that, we accidentally state, okay, because it's kind of occurring in our unconscious nature, and then it all of a sudden slips into our consciousness. So as if I maybe saw the word cones, and then all of a sudden was thinking about or stated, instead of just saying cones, I said ice cream cones because it was something that maybe my unconscious was really bothered or thinking about, and then I kind of had this, Freudian slip. And we'll talk about more of examples of these in class. Another thing that Freud came up with was the dream theory, one of the theories of dreams, why we dream. Freud believed that it was an opportunity to just discharge our unconscious wants and desires. So we have all these unconscious things that are occurring in the iceberg underneath, and sometimes we don't have an opportunity to kind of discharge them. So Freud believes that we do it in our dreams. So a lot of our dreams have underlining meanings. Okay, the manifest is the dream storyline. Okay, so let's say I have a story of I keep having the story of this dog licking my face. Okay, the storyline is going to be kind of like that manifest content. And the latent is going to be the symbolic meaning. What is the meaning of this dog keeps licking my face? Maybe Freud would think something like, well, maybe I don't feel loved, or I don't feel accepted. Despite his theories, there is no solid evidence to support this. It is an interpretation. It's kind of like an understanding, a theory that's out there. But there's nothing that proves this to be true. Another term to know is often Freud believes that we repress some of our our unwanted thoughts. So repress to suppress the thoughts, feelings, or our memories that are too painful. We'll just leave them above underneath the surface. We don't want to talk about it. It's so embarrassing. We'll just leave them down there. And that's why he believes talk therapy is good, because we're releasing those painful things. Okay, so Freud's structure of personality. Personality is fully developed by the age of 6, but we continue to refine and expand our basic personality structure through the lifespan. So kind of looking at development, when does our personality really develop? Freud believed that the personality consists of 3 parts, okay, which pull an individual in different directions, creating a conflict. Okay, this is called the id, the ego, or the superego. How we resolve the conflicts determines our behaviors and shapes our personality. First thing we have is the id. Id is something that we're born with. The id is a concept, and it represents our innate biological needs. Okay, so I have my id. My id is the one that causes me to be hungry, causes thirst, causes sleep, and it's our sexual drive. Okay, these are the things that we want. We want from when we're infants. We want that pleasure met. Okay, the id is described as a force which is demanding, impulsive, irrational, and extremely selfish. It operates on I want to be pleased. So I want to eat, I want to eat, I want to eat. I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty. Okay. If our behavior was completely controlled by our id, we would have to have all our own way all the time. Okay, so think about a newborn baby. If that's the only thing that we had was the id and we never created anything else, we'd be going around crying all the time to be pleased, essentially. Freud believes that a newborn baby behavior is completely dominated by the id. They want everything immediately, and they must have their needs met. Okay, some more stuff with the id. It exists entirely in our unconscious awareness. It's entirely underneath the iceberg, so we are never really aware of it. Our hidden true, these are kind of like the animalistic wants and desires. It works on the pleasure principle, which we want to avoid pain and receive instant gratification. Okay, so think about those egocentric kids. They just want this id met. Then you develop the ego, and this pretty much develops, I would say, about the ages of 3. When we're starting to understand a little bit about reality. You're not the only person in existence. The ego develops gradually when children begin to understand more about how the real world operates. Okay, so we think about the theory of mind. When you start understanding that there's other people in reality, it's a part of the personality which is realistic, logical, and orderly. You're understanding that you're not the only one here. It operates on the reality principle. Okay, it tries to ensure that the needs of the ids are met, but in a socially acceptable way that's appropriate. So you can't just scream, okay, in the middle of a grocery store if you want a candy bar anymore. You need to understand that there's a little bit with reality with this situation. Therefore, the ego considers real life restrictions in dealing with the id. Okay, so here you have that id totally underneath the surface. You have the ego that's rising a little bit, taking part of you're conscious of it. Okay, you can't be screaming in public all the time, but sometimes it's a little bit below the surface. And then the last one, you could see the superego. It's pretty much all the way from the bottom all the way to the top of our awareness. Okay, a little bit more with the ego. The ego develops after the id. It works on the reality principle. It negotiates between the id and your environment. Okay, in our conscious and unconscious minds. And it is what everyone sees as our personality. So it's kind of like the thing in the middle. Okay, then you have your superego. Superegos are conscious. It's always looking after us. It's judging us. It's helping us understand our morals and our values. So I always kind of think of the id is the devil on the shoulder. The superego is the angel. And then you're trying to make the decision, the ego in the middle. Okay, it operates on the moral principle. What is right from wrong. Okay, the process of identification is the process in which you start to take your parents' values in the development of this. Okay, it gives this feeling of guilt for negative behavior, pride for positive behavior. Okay, you're always trying to get perfection. Superego's main function is to block the id and persuade the ego to make a more moralistic decision. Okay, so you can't scream and cry anymore, little Johnny, in the middle of the floor, because you want to make sure that your mommy isn't embarrassed, and you want to make sure that you're acting appropriately, so don't pee on the floor, and then the ego would kind of balance that out. Okay. It's the last stage to develop here, and it develops at about the age of 5. Right? Remember, there's a little bit of wiggle room here. Maybe it's developing later. It is our conscious, what we think of the difference between right and wrong. The ego often has to mediate between the superego and the id. Angel on my shoulder. Okay. Next thing Freud begins to talk about is the psychosexual stages of development. Freud believes that our personality forms during the first few years. He concluded that children pass through stages known as the psychosexual stages of development, in which the id wants to be pleasured, and focuses on distinct pleasure areas, and these areas are called erogenous zones. Erogenous zones are pleasure zones, such as the mouth, the anus, and the genital regions. We're going to do whatever we can to get that region or get that stimulation fulfilled. Okay? If we're overindulged in something, or if we're frustrated because we're not having that need met, it can cause a fixation. Okay? Or us to kind of feel stuck in a certain area. Okay, so his psychosexual stages of development consists of 5 stages that you need to know. Each of the stages has a situation where you can have a fixation in that stage, where you can have way too much kind of cuddling or way too much exposure to that stage, or you can have not enough, which can cause you to have certain personality traits. So the first one is 0 to 18 months. And it is called the oral stage because everything is kind of wrapped around your mouth in terms of toys and hands and sucking on food. Okay, you can either be overexposed, where you have way too much. Maybe you have a pacifier or the bottle, and this can lead to you being gullible and optimistic. You can also have maybe not enough. Okay, and you lacked that food that you needed. And that could lead for you to be suspicious and envious. The anal stage is from about 18 months to 3 years old, and you are learning how to potty train. So you're learning how to you're in control of getting rid of that waste. Whether you want the waste to go in the diaper, or you want the waste to maybe go in the toilet. If you're one that kind of lacks a lot of control here, and you get frustrated when you're going to the bathroom, this can lead to an anal expulsive character, where you're really messy, disorganized, and reckless. Maybe you're the type of kid that has to go right after they just asked you. That's could lead to this. You also could be overindulgent, way too tidy, way too clean, way too protective in terms of going to the bathroom. You're going to have an anal retentive character where you're neat, you're careful, and you're withholding sometimes, maybe, going to the bathroom. So the phallic stage happens from about 3 to 5, and this is when little kids, 3 to 5-year-olds, start to understand their genitals. So little boys have a penis, and the little girls have a vagina. Okay, they notice that there's someone different than if they have a little brother, sister, or maybe their mom. They notice something is different than themselves. Okay, if they're overexposed to this, okay, if they're overindulgent in this kind of understanding, they can be kind of reckless in love, overly indulgent in love. When you're older, you may have a personality to love everybody. You can't control your sexual urges. However, if you struggle in this stage, he says that you may be unsure about love. Okay. Another thing that happens in this stage is what's known as the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex. The Oedipus complex happens for little boys. Boys begin to have a huge bond with their mother. They had a bond because they breastfed from her before. She's a lot of the times the primary caregiver, pretty much idolizes her. Parallel to this, boys begin to identify with the father. The figure parallel to him in terms is the biological sex. So he knows that his mother is different from him. He knows his father is the same. He begins to get really jealous of his dad. Okay? And maybe some people think that this is like the animalistic instinct that we, are searching for our prey. That's kind of a little bit bizarre. Okay? But the dad is essentially a threat to him because he wants to be with his mom. Okay? At the end of the stage, the little boys stop kind of obsessing about their mom. Okay? And they end up repressing those thoughts. And they begin to have a strong bond with their father. Because of castration, they don't want to be left off, okay, by themselves. They fear like that if they, oppose their father, then their father is going to kind of like throw them out of the house. So they'd rather be kind of one with daddy, okay, and maybe repress the thoughts about mom and then kind of become friends with daddy. All right. This isn't a little kid becoming, crazy sexually, like having fantasies about his mom. Okay. This is just that he really wants to hang out with her. He wants to be with her. Okay, then you have the Electra complex. So what about girls? During the phallic stage, the daughter becomes attached to her father. She becomes more like kind of obsessed with her dad because her dad's different, daddy's girl. She becomes more hostile towards her mother. She doesn't want her mom to sit by her dad. She wants to sit on daddy's lap. She believes that maybe her mom is responsible for her not having a penis. Okay. This is due mostly to the idea that the girl is envious of her father, and she has what's called penis envy. Okay, she wants one. This leads to resentment towards her mother, who the girl believes causes her castration. Okay, and then again you see that she doesn't want her mom to castrate her and leave her, so she begins to be one with the mom. Okay, so going on to the next stage then is latency. Latency happens from about 6 to 12 years old. This is where Freud believes all sexual activity is pretty much suppressed. Your superego is beginning to develop, your morals, okay? You're beginning to understand that you can't, be kind of climbing all over mom, that you need to kind of understand that dad's in the picture too, and you can't always get what you want. Okay, your sexual drives kind of lie dormant for a while, and a lot of your focus is on school sports and same-sex relationships. So you're hanging out with your buddies and your friends, and girls are gross or boys are gross. Okay, and then the last stage is the genital stage. This is pretty much from puberty and beyond. This is when you begin to notice other boys or other girls. Your genitals are beginning to develop. You may have your first orgasm. It's really focused on reproduction at this point in time. You're less having unresolved conflict, and more issues are trying to figure out love and relationships. Alright, the last set of the video notes does discuss the defense mechanisms. You do need to know all the different defense mechanisms, and there is a nice chart that lists the different defense mechanisms for you, that I would make sure that you have the description and a possible example, because we will be using these in class. There are 8 different defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms, the ego has a pretty important job, and that is to protect us from threatening thoughts in our unconscious. One way it protects us is through defense mechanisms. Okay, sometimes it's so painful that we don't want to have that thought constantly going through our head, so these defense mechanisms help protect us. You are usually unaware that you're even using them, or that they're even occurring. The first one is repression. Pushing thoughts into our unconscious to banish anxiety and the arousing thoughts, feelings, and memories. If you were sexually abused, sometimes you might not necessarily remember what the abuser looked like. Another thing is you act like they don't remember. You ask a soldier who comes back from war, what was your experience like? They may say, I don't remember the details. I don't remember who was there. I don't remember. Because maybe those events were so painful for them. Another one is regressing. Okay, sometimes you return to an earlier comforting form of behavior. Individual is faced with anxiety, so it retreats to a more infantile psychosexual stage where psychic energy remains fixated. You don't want to grow up and accept the differences. So let's say that you just got a bad grade on your test and you don't want to accept it as an adult. Okay, so you might run home to mommy and say, Mommy, help me because I feel so sad. And then mommy comforts you. Okay, so you may return to childhood. Reaction formation. Reaction formation is expressing the opposite of how you truly feel. The ego unconsciously switches unacceptable impulses into the opposite. Thus, people may express feelings that are opposite of their anxiety arousing unconscious feelings. So deep down inside, you may hate somebody, like you may hate Miss Gavin, okay, but you walk into the room and you're like, oh, Miss Gavin, I love you, you look so great, you're wonderful, okay, but deep down inside, you cannot stand her, right? So you're kind of doing the opposite of actually how you feel. Projection, I would say that this is one that I use a lot. People disguise their own threatening impulses by attributing them to others. You are actually mad at the offender, but you turn it around so it makes them look like the offender. So an example would be, no, I did nothing wrong, but look what you did. And in reality, it's something maybe that you did. So you try and blame somebody else for your issues. Rationalization. Rationalization is self-justifying explanations in place of the real, more threatening, unconscious reasons, coming up with beneficial results of an undesirable outcome, trying to make logic of the situation. Let's say you just got a college denial letter. You didn't get accepted to, let's say, ISU, and you kind of say it's really painful and you don't want to talk about it, or you just use rationalization and you kind of just start saying, like, I didn't even want to go there anyway. It's for losers. Like, who would want to go there, to make yourself feel better? I didn't really want to go there anyway. It was too expensive. Displacement. You direct one's feelings towards another person or an object, so you shift your aggression or sexual impulses towards a less acceptable or less threatening person. So let's say I'm really upset with my mom, but my mom is somebody who I really respect and I can't yell at her, so I might take my anger out on my sister. So I take it out on a less threatening. You're really mad at your boss, but you can't be mad at your boss, so you take it out on, let's say, your students or your coworkers. Okay, often displaced on a less threatening thing. One may take his anger out by bullying a kid because you're really upset in the situation. Sublimation is channeling one's frustration towards a different goal. People rechannel their unconscious, unacceptable impulses into socially approved activities. So let's say you really like fighting with people. Well, maybe you join a hobby like wrestling. So you get to use those in a more socially accepted way. All right, let's say that you really like violence. Well, maybe you'll join a sport that allows you to let those aggressions out. And then denial, which I think is pretty easy. People refuse to believe it ever happened. They're not accepting the ego-threatening truth. No, pretend like nothing ever happened. So those are the 8 different defense mechanisms you do need to know. This video talks about and recapped the 2 major theories that we're going to use today, which is the humanistic and the psychoanalytical approach. We did get into deep on the psychoanalytical approach with Sigmund Freud, the id, ego, superego, the psychosexual stages, and we talked about the defense mechanisms. Make sure you have these notes in class tomorrow.